Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Malmstrom. I'm the Vice President of Sales here at Alpine Brokerage. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this morning. We have an exciting presentation lined up for you. Um, Real quick note, we are recording today's presentation, so I would ask that we don't do any questions. Any questions you have, please write them down and reach out to your account executive afterwards. We'll be happy to answer those one by one. Um, this is a great opportunity for everybody. We'll be talking about the foreign national market, and we get a lot of phone calls, a lot of questions from agents who say, listen, I work with these clients who are either not full citizens in the U.S. yet or live elsewhere and just travel into this country. What are my options? This is a huge market, and there's a ton of opportunity, but most of the carriers not only haven't really been willing to play in this market, but haven't been dedicated to it. And we're fortunate that one of our key partners, Lincoln, actually has developed a dedicated foreign national department. They are actively working on building this market. And Kara, I keep butchering her name, Kara Moody, is in charge of that department, and she is going to be going through with you some of the opportunities out there and what different things you should be looking for with the clients that you have, with the people you run across, and how those fit. So I am going, without any further ado, hand this over to Kara. Kara, you should have control now.
Great. I think I do. Appreciate this, Chris, and thanks to you and to the team at Alpine Brokerage for hosting me here. And thanks to all of you on the phone, too, for your time today and for your time listening if you are listening into this as a recording after the fact. So as Chris said, my name is Kara Moody. I work for Lincoln Financial, and I am Lincoln's Foreign National Insurance Consultant. And so what does that mean? That means that I am here, along with the entire team at Lincoln, actually, to bring you ideas and to advocate for your foreign national business. So today I'm going to encourage you to think big and to think global, because as Chris mentioned, foreign national insurance is a huge and growing opportunity. We'll go through some of what that opportunity is today and also some ideas for how you can tap into that opportunity. And then a little bit on when you find an opportunity, what do you do next? And we'd love to hear what your questions are, as Chris mentioned, as a follow-up to this webinar. So without further ado, we'll talk a little bit about who is this market, what the opportunities are, where you find these clients, and again, what do you do when you do find an opportunity? So as we mentioned, we're going to go through these topics, but first, who are we talking about when we say foreign national? So you're going to be able to tell that I was a third grade teacher at one point because I made a rhyme for it. Essentially, Lincoln, when we say foreign national, we mean three different categories of people. First category is gone away. Second category is here to stay. Third category is here for at least 15 days. So of course that rhymes, a little cheesy, but what do we mean by these three categories? So gone away, that would be a U.S. citizen who is living abroad. And I'll say a U.S. citizen or green card holder who's living abroad, because we actually underwrite green card holders just like we would a U.S. citizen. So gone away would be U.S. citizen living abroad. Think about the multinational corporations that are in your area. Think about how much global exchange goes on there. People going abroad to work at another branch of the company for a couple years, and maybe the company's bringing people here as well. So that kind of gets into our second category, here to stay. That would be what you might loosely term as a resident alien. Now remember, green card holders are underwritten at Lincoln as a U.S. citizen, but they still may have opportunities for different types of planning than a U.S. citizen would, right? And also, we're going to look at somebody like a visa holder, for example. Maybe that person who's come to the U.S. to work at a different branch of their company for a couple of years, they've brought their family. Maybe they're here indefinitely working. Well, we're going to be able to underwrite them depending on the facts of the case. And then the third category is probably what all of you think of when you think of a foreign national client. That would be a non-resident alien. So somebody who's not a citizen and doesn't live here in the United States. Now, as you see from my little rhyme here, they have to at least have been here for 15 days in any given year, but that's really not that long of a time. I mean, you're essentially saying spending 2 weeks here more. I was going to say more or less, but at least 2 weeks here, right? And if you look at the opportunity that's out there, I mean, there are shifts in global wealth going on. The number of global millionaires is growing. The number of ultra high net worth individuals is growing. I mean, over 100% growth since the year 2000 in these individuals. And of course, those are the individuals we're interested in because they understand and could benefit from life insurance. And so if we look at these three categories of people, really, what's the opportunity here? Why do they want U.S. life insurance? Well, there are three main categories of reasons that we see at Lincoln why people come to us for U.S. life insurance, even if they are not U.S. citizens or if they're living abroad. The first reason is actually pretty simple and not all that exciting, but it's still a very valuable one. It's that they are looking for insurance for the same reasons that you and I would look for insurance, same reasons a U.S. citizen would look for insurance. I mean, people are people, right? They have families to protect, businesses to protect. They want to leave a legacy. They want to diversify their assets. Supplemental retirement planning. I mean, think about if they're coming here to work, they're probably, maybe that was a promotion for them, right? Maybe making a lot of money, maybe their spouse isn't working. So again, it's more important than ever for them to protect that income and for them to plan for asset diversification, for retirement, for things like that. And maybe they don't know what's available to them. I mean, a lot of U.S. citizens don't even know what life insurance is all about and what it can do for them. Never mind somebody who did not grow up with our financial system. They probably don't know that it's available to them or what's available to them. So that's the first reason, is that any reason why you would normally sell life insurance to a client, that would be applicable to this group of individuals too. And it's just a matter of finding these individuals and how we present the ideas to them. But what's different about planning for national clients? Taxation can be different, actually. And we're going to go through this at a very, very high level. And this is where I always have to put a caveat that I am definitely not a CPA and Lincoln can't give tax advice. But the important thing here is that foreign national clients oftentimes need this type of tax planning. They're oftentimes working with people who are giving them this type of planning, CPAs who specialize in the international market, for example, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too. So you can start to think about, who do I know in my network who might work with these clients and be doing some planning with them? And for us to know at a very, very high level what the taxation rules could be and how they might differ from what you and I are beholden to. So there's income taxation and there's estate taxation. And on the income tax side, generally, if you're considered to be a resident alien by the U.S. government, you're going to be taxed like a U.S. citizen. So you're going to have to report income from within the U.S. and outside of the U.S. Now, a non-resident alien is only going to be subject to income taxation on their U.S. source income. So think about places where they would make money in the U.S. They would be income taxed on that by the U.S. government. But how do you know if your client is a resident alien or a non-resident alien? And this is where things get a little complicated. So I'm not going to get into too much detail, but essentially there are two tests to determine if your client is a resident alien for income tax purposes, which, just a little side note, it's going to be different for estate tax purposes. But the tests for resident alien are the green card test, which is actually really simple. Do you have a green card? If you do, we're going to tax you like resident alien. If you don't have a green card, we're still going to say, are you substantially present in the U.S.? And that's where things get a little complicated, because essentially we're using this detailed formula to figure out if you've spent a critical number of days here in the US over the last 3 years. So those are the tests to determine if you're a resident alien and therefore income taxed like a US citizen. And if you don't meet one of those tests, you're going to be taxed like a non-resident alien. Now, from a life insurance perspective, the opportunity there could be that if you are a non-resident alien, let's say, and you are looking to invest in the US, let's say mutual funds, something like that, you might have to think about the taxation from any gain, from any interest, dividends from that, from those mutual funds. What if you, as a non-resident alien, purchased something like a VUL or even an IUL to achieve something similar, right? But let's say a VUL with those same mutual funds or very similar mutual funds as sub-accounts. That's an idea, right? And we all know that the cash values of life insurance are tax deferred, and in many times when you go to access those cash values are not included in taxable income in the U.S., and that would go for U.S., or I should say non-U.S. citizens as well. So that's an idea that we can bring to our clients on the income tax side. Now, estate tax, I mentioned, that has even different rules from income taxation. So how do you determine if your client is a resident alien for estate tax purposes? It's a different test, and it has to do with whether they're domiciled in the United States. And what do we mean by that? Basically, we would say, do you live in the US with no present intention of leaving? If that is true, then we would, or I should say the US government would tax these individuals as resident aliens. And for the most part, they're taxed just like US citizens on worldwide assets. So that's something that they're going to want to think about, right? If this actually pertains to them, they have to think about the US estate taxing them on any assets they have, not just in the US, but also outside of the US. Now, the good thing is that they'll have a lifetime exemption just like you and I would. And this year, it's still $5.49 million. So this doesn't really pertain to people who have smaller estates, but let's say that these are business people, executives, maybe they have inherited a lot of assets. You know, they're going to want to think about this. And the only difference, which is very interesting, between the way you and I are estate taxed and the way a resident alien would be estate taxed is the unlimited marital deduction, because these guys, non-citizens, are not able to take the unlimited marital deduction. So why do we care? Because if you think about it, let's say a couple with a large estate, if we're working with 2 US citizens, really we're planning for them to have that estate tax burden at the end, well, when the second person passes, the second spouse passes. But in this case, let's say that there's a US citizen married to a non-citizen. If the US citizen passes first, that non-citizen actually doesn't have the ability, as we see here, to claim the unlimited marital deduction. So if that citizen spouse had a very large estate, that estate tax may be due when they pass. Now, there are a couple different ways to plan for this. One is called the QDOT. Please reach out if you'd like to hear more about that. But the other way to plan for this is, of course, life insurance, right? That would provide liquidity when the US citizen spouse passes to pay their estate taxes. So that's another idea that we can bring to our clients. And this would go for 2 non-citizens as well who are married. But maybe they don't know about this. Now, how would you be taxed if you are a non-resident alien? So let's say you either don't live here or you live here and you don't plan to stay. You're really only going to be taxed on your US situs assets, so assets that are here, and actually only a few of those assets, right? These are the types of assets that the US government is going to tax you on. And particularly if you think about real estate, and I'll share a statistic with you that's pretty surprising about the purchase of US residential real estate by foreign buyers. So non-resident aliens are buying US real estate, so they need to be thinking about estate tax, because remember we said that the exemption for resident aliens is $5.49 million, just like it would be for you and I. What is it for these guys? It's actually only $60,000. So I'm pretty sure their real estate is going to be worth more than that, and they're going to want to have to think about the taxation. Now, there are some assets that are exempt from U.S. estate taxation for non-resident aliens. Most notably what? Life insurance. So if you think about the planning you're doing with your U.S. citizen clients, you're oftentimes, if they're wealthy, putting that life insurance in an ILIT. You wouldn't have to do that here because in most cases, that life insurance is not going to be includable in their taxable estate. So some interesting planning opportunities here, and most of these, wealthy non-resident aliens, they are getting tax advice. But if they're not, they should be, right? Because they might want to be. And certainly, if there's a life insurance opportunity, that's our expertise, right? That's your expertise. And is their CPA going to be selling them that life insurance? Maybe not, or maybe that's something they would want to partner with you on. So I think the big takeaway here is that there is an opportunity on the taxation side, but the other big takeaway is that it's very complicated. And I didn't even mention treaties. So on the estate tax side, there are treaties with other countries between the U.S. and other countries. On the income tax side, there are even more treaties between the U.S. and other countries. And the content of those treaties can totally change what I said here. So the moral of the story is find somebody to partner with, but just, it's good to be versed, at least at a high level, in what the types of planning that these non-citizens especially are going to have to be doing. So first reason why this is an opportunity, why foreign nationals are interested in U.S. life insurance would be because they're people, right? They have families, businesses, estates to protect. The second reason would be because they sometimes do have different taxation rules that apply to them. And the third reason is actually, personally, what I find to be most compelling is the idea of asset diversification. We're used to, in the life insurance world, selling life insurance, right? It's not something that many U.S. citizens wake up every day and say, I'm going to go buy myself a life insurance policy. We know it really takes a great salesperson to sell life insurance, but here we are. Wouldn't it be nice for once to have a group of buyers to work with, people who really want U.S. life insurance? And that's, in many cases, what a non-resident alien is, what a foreign national could be for your business, is somebody who's truly interested in the benefits of U.S. life insurance as soon as they find out about the benefits, right? And why are they interested in U.S. life insurance as an asset diversification strategy? Well, here are some reasons, and this is certainly not a comprehensive list, but first and foremost, U.S. life insurance is in U.S. dollars. That's really attractive to people from other countries. The fact that our economy here is so stable and that our industry is so highly regulated. I mean, I always kind of say here, that's a thorn in our side sometimes, right? The regulation, but that's viewed as being something that's very, very attractive if you're diversifying your assets. If you're a wealthy person in another country and you're looking to diversify. The other thing is that not just at Lincoln, but across the entire life insurance industry in the U.S., there's this amazing product selection that doesn't exist in other places. And the pricing of U.S. life insurance is really good. Now, why? Why is the pricing so good? Because we have great mortality here. So they can actually get a lot more leverage for their money by buying U.S. life insurance. And the amount of coverage available, depending on what country, right? But the amount of coverage available can be a lot greater here. The other thing I would add before I get into the privacy piece of it is that the cash values of life insurance and the tax advantages of the cash values of life insurance make U.S. life insurance a really attractive asset diversification strategy. We do see a lot of overfunded policies, like an overfunded IUL is probably the thing we sell most of with these clients. So maybe like a 10-pay with an increasing death benefit. We also do see a lot of our guaranteed products. And again, maybe that's more of the wealth transfer sale, but we do see a lot of UL1 and GUL. So those are our guaranteed products. And then our IUL and Asset Edge, VUL, which are our more cash value accumulation products. That's what we see the most of here. Privacy, that's a huge thing a lot of times for clients in other countries, wealthy clients in other countries who may be high profile. They may feel like their wealth is an exposure for them. So why do they view life insurance, US life insurance, as being such a private asset? Well, I think we look at it that way too, but there's this thing called FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. And again, we're going back a little bit into the tax side of things, but just at a high level to be aware of what this is, it's a tax treaty that the US has with many other countries around the world. And essentially it says that if you and I, as US citizens, go abroad and open an account, the foreign institutions where we're opening the accounts have to tell us, or have to tell the US government about our account in a foreign country. And why do they do that? Because obviously the US government wants to tax us on that. So that's why the treaty is set up for globally, for the US government to be able to understand which accounts US citizens have other places. It doesn't always go the other way. And that's what's so interesting about this. There is another global tax treaty called CRS, which most countries participate in. And it does go the other way. You know, if other people from other countries have accounts, certain types of accounts here, the US government is going to report those back to their country. But one notable difference in many, many cases is life insurance. And so in many cases, if you are not a citizen of the United States and you have a US life insurance policy here, it's not necessarily getting reported back to your home country. So that's kind of the whole privacy idea, that it's an attractive asset to have for that reason. So very high level, certainly work with the CPAs in your network, certainly have your clients work with their CPAs to discuss the exact implications for them, because again, we can't speak to how the tax treatment in their home country would be, but these are just good things to be aware of and why it's such an attractive asset for clients in other countries. So that's the why. So we get that. There's an opportunity there. I'm going to just breeze through this one really quickly because I want to get to where do you find these clients? Because now that we know there's an opportunity, I mean, what do you just stand on the street corner and say, hey, are you a citizen? Are you a citizen? Are you a foreign national? No, that's ridiculous. And you might be saying too, well, I live in a place where I'm not sure that there are a lot of foreign national clients. So let's look at what are the top states where foreign-born individuals live. What do you think? Family Feud, right? So some of these are going to look familiar and are no-brainers, right? California, Texas, Florida, New York, New Jersey, right? But some of them you may not think of right away. I mean, there are lots of foreign nationals living in the Chicago area. Even my home state, Connecticut, I would never have expected to see that there. But the moral of the story is that there are foreign national clients everywhere. And this is based on 2010 census data. 12.9% of the population was foreign born at that time. In 2015, it was actually 13.5%. So you see there's a trend here. I mean, 1 million people get their green cards every year. So this is really a growing trend. And wherever you go, there are probably foreign national clients who maybe don't know that they can get US life insurance, maybe don't know what the options are or how to do it. So the location, that's one thing, but how do you get hooked up with these individuals? It really does come down to having access to those individuals, having access to those communities in some cases. And that may be partnering with an advisor that you know who happens to have access to those clients but doesn't necessarily feel comfortable with the life insurance side of things. But here's where we see a bulk of this business coming from. You have attorneys, right? Immigration attorneys, law firms that work with international clients, real estate professionals. And here's where I said I was going to share a statistic. $100 billion, which is a big number, right? That's in 2015 and 2016 each. the amount of U.S. residential real estate that was purchased by foreign buyers. It's a lot of real estate. And a large portion of that was sold to people from China, but a lot of other countries as well. And where were they buying that? Here are the top 5 states. And again, frequent flyers, right? Florida, California, Texas, Arizona, New York. But even I have a colleague in North Carolina, and he said, well, I just don't know if there are a lot of people down that way that I could work with in the foreign national market. And this same report, which was done by the National Association of Realtors, showed that among Mexican nationals, North Carolina was the third choice of a place to buy property. So the third most frequent place where a Mexican national would buy U.S. residential real estate. So really, I mean, think about who's in your area. Again, multinational corporations, CPA firms, as we talked about. I mean, we know that there's a tax planning opportunity. Who do you know in your network that you could kind of say, hey, did you think about life insurance for these clients as you're doing this tax planning? P&C firms, we see that a lot, especially when people have come here to start businesses or have businesses abroad with branches here. They're already providing some other types of insurance, but maybe not the life insurance. As we mentioned, multinational corporations, I mean, those are located all over the country, and there's a huge global exchange going on with those guys. Banks, as I mentioned, law firms, broker-dealers. And what's so interesting about banks and broker-dealers is that think about Lincoln Underwriting or any carrier's underwriting. We're looking to understand who are these individuals who are coming to us for insurance, right? We want to understand as much about them as we can so we understand the risk. And what does a bank or a broker-dealer do? Well, they certainly don't let anybody open an account, right? We could almost look at that as a first round of field underwriting. So thinking about your cover letters that you would write for these cases, say, hey, this is a referral from such and such international bank. They're a private banking client there. They need life insurance for XYZ. So these clients, they have the assets in the U.S. Maybe their banker or their advisor is not necessarily going to sell them the life insurance, but it's something that they need and want based on those reasons we talked about. And then lastly, this is something I never would have thought about before I was in this role, but this is a big opportunity to find clients in this space too, because a lot of, so universities and alumni university alumni associations, if you think about wealthy people in other countries, they send their children to go to school here. Those kids grow up. Maybe they stay here, maybe they don't, but they stay in touch with a lot of the contacts they made here, and they come back frequently, or they're partnering with those people they went to school with. So those are good places to meet these clients too. And actually, speaking of universities, one of the producers I work closely with has a tie into a large university, and a lot of the professors are actually foreign national clients. So there are opportunities out there, and it's about thinking, who do I know, and putting together some thoughts when you see them next, reaching out to them, when you have opportunities to network, how can you partner with them and bring more value to their practice and bring more value to their clients. So those are ideas about where to find these clients. Now, what if you do find these clients and you get to sit down with them and they say, great, let's do the life insurance. What are the best practices? And so I'm going to speak mostly from a Lincoln perspective, but I think this would probably go for any carrier that you end up working with. There's a big focus on field underwriting. And I mentioned that a little bit with the bank and brokerage clients, but the more work we can do up front, the better. Because you'll find, I mean, underwriting can be difficult for any case. And when you add the layer in that this client doesn't live here, maybe their medical records aren't here, maybe most of their assets are not necessarily in the US, maybe they're in another country. I mean, if you think about those layers, maybe there's a language barrier, maybe there's a cultural barrier. There's a lot more at play here, and we'll want to put our heads together early on and help you figure out, okay, what do I need to get from the client? What do I need to submit? So we do have this form, and many carriers have a similar form. Maybe they call it a foreign national supplement, something like that. For now, ours is called the NRA Nexus Verification Form. We are updating this, so we'll keep you guys posted on that. A lot of questions on that, but honestly, I can't emphasize this enough. Spending the time up front, going through these questions. There's no client signature needed here, but what you know about your clients, going through and saying, could this be an opportunity for U.S. life insurance? Could this be a Lincoln case? And really answering those questions. Now, notice we focus on nexus. Now, what on earth is nexus? This is something that's important to a lot of carriers. It means a close tie to the U.S. And that's really, if I had to boil down what's important, at least to Lincoln on underwriting for these cases, it's nexus. So the key questions are, does the client actually come to the U.S.? Remember, we have that 15-day rule. Do they actually come here? That's what our underwriters are going to be asking themselves. And they're also going to be asking themselves, why do they come here? What are they doing when they're in the U.S.? And so that's where the nexus comes in. They need to have a close economic tie with the U.S. So we think about clients coming here. Oh, my daughter goes to school here. I'm going to come visit her. I'll come visit her a couple times a year. Maybe I'm here for a month in the year. Well, that fulfills the time stamp, right? But why are they here? It's not really a close economic relationship that they have or an economic reason. So what would be legitimate economic reasons to be here? Well, ownership of property in the U.S. So if they have a vacation home or rental real estate property or anything like that, a business, and I tell this story because it's just an example of how attractive U.S. property is to people in other countries. I used to live in San Francisco, and when I was living there, there was this story in the paper about how a Chinese couple had purchased a road in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in San Francisco. Actually, they purchased the actual street. And what had happened was the association, the neighborhood association, hadn't paid their taxes for years. I mean, obviously had to be an oversight on somebody's part, but it went up for auction, and this Chinese couple bought it for $90,000. And I don't know if they've put in a toll booth or anything since then, but the whole idea, and what the couple said was, we just wanted to own something in the U.S. So that would count as a property interest. Usually we see vacation homes, though. Another close tie to the U.S. would be primary employment in the U.S. So think about those visa holders, right? And now Lincoln doesn't ask, many carriers will ask about what kind of visa you have. Lincoln doesn't really ask about the type of visa, but oftentimes if you're working full-time in the U.S. in one of these multinational corporations, you have something like an H-1B visa, L-1, E, some sort of an E visa, whether that's an investment visa or work visa. So there are many types of visas. You don't have to memorize them for Lincoln's purposes, but just know if your client is working full-time, basically their primary job is in the U.S., then we count that as a close economic tie. Also, being a business owner in a foreign country, we get lots of these. People who own a business in a foreign country, and they're engaged in business in the U.S. They transact business in the U.S. Now that's where you and I and Chris and his team and our underwriters can put our heads together and say, well, what exactly does constitute transacting business in the U.S.? It's a little bit up for interpretation. Here's what we've seen. Obviously, if they have clients in the U.S. and they come to visit their clients, if they have distribution channels in the U.S. So, for example, let's say we did a case on a Mexican national who owns a ranch, cattle ranch in Mexico, and they export cattle to the U.S. Well, he was coming here to meet with his distribution channels, and that, of course, is transacting business in the U.S. But even we worked with this guy from Jamaica who has a tourist business in Jamaica, had vendors in the U.S. I mean, I guess if you're ordering something on Amazon from a vendor, that doesn't really count, right? But he was coming here and ordering, I mean, you know, he was operating a large business in Jamaica. So he was really coming here and, you know, he shared with us who he was meeting with, how often he was meeting with them, what he was buying from them. He shared some invoices with us, and it was certainly some substantial business transactions. That was fine too. And then the last type of, I mean, I guess I would call all of these proof, right? Proof of this close connection to the US. The last piece of proof could be a bank or brokerage account in the US. We would require that it has at least $100,000 in it, net of the first premium. So it's going to have to be more than $100,000, and it has to have been open for 6 months. Now, can you set that up for the purposes of getting US life insurance? No, not really. But a lot of times you'll find if your client is coming here a lot, they probably have some sort of bank or brokerage account, especially if they're investing in the US in other ways with their time. Maybe they are, you know, transacting business here. Maybe they could have children here going to school. They probably understand the idea of investing in the US. They like the idea. They may have a sizable account. So it just has to be really one of these things. But the more you have, the better our team likes it, obviously. And if you think about from an asset perspective too, we will underwrite for the face amount. We'll use assets in the US and abroad, but they just have to be independently verifiable. And what does that mean? I mean, most assets in the US, our underwriting team can verify, hey, you're the owner and here's about how much it's worth. Other countries, it can be challenging. But if you have a bank or brokerage account in another country and you can send in statements, then that's going to help us verify. Where it gets tricky is you have foreign real estate, foreign privately held companies. But again, we'll get our heads together. The moral of the story is, this is a terrible way to put it, but I think about going to the DMV. Bring everything that you can think of that would support your argument. And we'll always take a look at it. And some of the stuff we'll be able to use, and maybe some of it we can't. But the more we have and the more consistent the story is, the better it is. So speaking of the story, I don't necessarily know that all of these cases would start as trials, because sometimes the travel situation is such that you just want to jump in and take a formal. But the whole idea here is that we want to look at, if you are willing to have us look at the case ahead of time, we definitely want to do that. As I mentioned, spending the time up front with that Nexus form. Even forget about the medicals right away, because sometimes those can be tricky to get. So send us the Nexus form and a cover letter. So that's what I was saying about the story. Tell us the story. I mean, you'll hear our Lincoln underwriters say that for every case, but especially for these guys. Why are they here? How often are they here? Why do they want US life insurance? How did you arrive at the face amount? Where did you meet this client? You know, what's their connection with the US? And you could even put in, you know, a general state of health there. So that if when we get to the medical underwriting, let's say we pass kind of this first litmus test. Hey, it's looking good. Let's get the formal. Let's start going out for medicals. Sometimes we can't get all the medicals we need, and sometimes that means we can't do the case. But sometimes that means, okay, we'll get creative. We'll see if we can get a letter from the doctor. We'll see if they're young and healthy. We'll see if we can just use the exam and the labs. Now, don't hold me to this, because it's certainly not going to be in every case. If there was a surgery or some sort of a medical situation that had happened, we probably need all the details we can get. And if we can't get all the details, sometimes we'll limit the face amount or we'll limit the offer, or not be able to offer at all. But we'll work with you on that. And so again, the moral of the story here is engage Chris and his team, and you know, we'll get everybody in touch with the right people at Lincoln, and we'll put our heads together with this on this case. So the paperwork itself, when you're ready to go formal, is actually not that different from any other paperwork that you would fill out. So again, we have the cover letter, the Nexus form, which again, you're already going to be thinking about. The application is the same. The only thing that would be different is the foreign travel or residence supplement. As many of you know, that's not something we can use in every state. So as long as you're pulling or having somebody pull the correct state paperwork, then you'll be fine. I also want to note here that Lincoln has this tele-app process that we came out with maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago. It's called Link Express. It's done really, really well. It, especially for these clients, if you think about the timing issue, hey, we're here for 2 weeks, we're not going to be back for another few months. You're going to want to get them early in their travel, right? Because all the business does have to be solicited in the U.S. That's something that the whole process has to be done in the U.S. actually. So that's something to be aware of. But if you use something like a tele-app process, it can make the process go a lot quicker. You don't have to, but it is available. Speaking of that, you submit the full application. What happens next? Your client is going to have an inspection report, which is it's an interview essentially that a vendor called First Financial Underwriting is going to conduct. It can be often be done in another language. So if it's not a really remote language, you can always request that in the cover letter. Hey, can we order the inspection report in Spanish, Mandarin, Japanese, what have you? And they're going to ask questions about employment, other types of medical history, things like that. And again, as much as the story lines up with what we're seeing here in the cover letter, the better. When we underwrite the case, we have medical records that we need. I mean, the exam should be done in the U.S. as well. Let's say that the client has to go back to their home country and we're ready to issue the policy and we're ready to deliver it. What if the client's like, well, I'm not coming back for another couple of months to the U.S. or not until, another few weeks? We can actually allow for, in many cases, the policy to be accepted via limited power of attorney. So that's unique. Some carriers offer that, some carriers don't. So that's an option for clients too, given that there's a different nature of the cadence of this business because of travel or residency. So other things to be thinking about, policy ownership. One thing that we don't allow at Lincoln, and many carriers don't allow this, is ownership by a non-U.S. entity. We don't come across it all that often, but there are certain parts of the world where clients tend to find that to be very attractive, and we just don't allow for it. It says here ownership by an LLC may be problematic. I wouldn't actually say it that way. I would say if a U.S. LLC is the owner, we just want to see the connection to the client, and we want to know that a foreign entity is not, it doesn't have beneficial interest in any way. So we'll work with you on that. Nexus assets also, I mean, we talked about being independently verified. We didn't talk about ownership of those assets. So if they have a home, if they're doing some of that tax planning, sometimes they're going to be owning their residential real estate in a U.S. trust or LLC. Again, we're just looking for the documentation. If you can provide us the trust documentation, you can provide us with the operating agreement of the LLC, we can often see the connection to the client. So again, we'll work with you on that stuff, but just stuff to be aware of. And we talked about financial justification. So there are some other things to be thinking about, but this is really what we're here for, to help you think through these things. Some people are doing a lot with commercially financed products these days or policies these days. I would say we can. The technical answer is we can do that for foreign nationals, but really we've only done one or two, because if you think about all the layers that go into not just a foreign national case, but also a premium finance case. But hey, you never know. APSs can take time to get, and there's another restriction too with politically exposed people. That's pretty standard for carriers. So if somebody's going on a mission trip every year, or somebody is a diplomat, something like that, we can't cover those people. That doesn't limit us, in too many ways. I don't see that come across too often. Other things to ask about, again, here's my third grade background. Other questions to ask. I made a little acronym, Lincoln Protects. P stands for payment, has to be paid for in US dollars from a US bank account. It's very standard. They need a reference number, that's R. So they have to have a social security number, a tax ID number, or they have to fill out a W-8. And honestly, what I see a lot of, for especially non-resident aliens, would be filling out a W-8, which is a U.S. tax form, at the time of application. So it's really not a big deal as long as they're willing to fill that out. Ownership, we talked about, of the policy has to be owned either personally by a family member that has a connection with the U.S. or is a U.S. citizen, or by a U.S. LLC, U.S. trust, or U.S. business. The tie to the U.S., that's the nexus. We've kind of beaten that one into the ground. And then the age restrictions, E would be 18 and 80. So those are the guardrails there. But 80 is actually pretty good. Most carriers go up to 70 or 75. So assuming the client is insurable, then go on and bring him or her over to Lincoln and we'll take a look. C stands for countries. So obviously that's something I haven't touched on, but is very, very important in this business. We don't cover people who are residents of or citizens of every country in the world. There are certain countries where between us and our reinsurers, we're just not willing to take the risk. And so we'll make sure that you get a copy of the Lincoln Foreign National Underwriting Guidelines that has a comprehensive list. It's over 90 countries that we cover, including a lot of the most, the frequent flyers, we would say. We do a lot of business with Mexican nationals, Japanese nationals, and increasingly Chinese nationals. But we also see a lot from Israel, Brazil, other parts of the Caribbean, like Jamaica or Trinidad and Tobago, India. So we have a very comprehensive list. And at Lincoln, if you medically qualify, we would approve you even for best class, regardless of which of those countries you're from. And that's kind of unique as well. The other T stands for time spent. So we talked about 15 days. We don't need to go there. That's really the only time requirement of time spent in the U.S. And then the S would be situs. And that's something that is often overlooked with these cases. So where is the app being taken? Are they just taking the app in the state where you have your practice? And if so, do they have another tie to that state? So I think when we look at nexus, we have to look at the nexus being not just to the US, but to the state where the app is being taken. A lot to remember. Don't worry about memorizing it all. Again, that's why Lincoln hired me. That's why you work with Chris and his team. And we're all going to put our heads together and help with these cases, because as you can see, the opportunity is there. So I am actually going to wrap it up right now. Basically covered who we're talking about, why foreign nationals would want U.S. life insurance. I mean, remember, they've got the same insurance needs as a U.S. client, but they have some differences, right, in tax planning and the desire for asset diversification. Where do you find them? Well, they don't just live on the coasts, right? They don't just all live in Florida, Texas, California. They're all over the U.S., and they are working with other centers of influence that you probably have in your network now, actually, and that you can certainly get in touch with. And then what do you do when you find those clients? Well, definitely focus on Nexus first. Why are they here in the U.S.? How much time are they spending here? And then let us help you vet the case early on. We've got that form. A great cover letter goes a really long way. And the questions that we need to ask, Lincoln protects, and we also will share our underwriting guidelines with you. That's a lot of information, and I so very much appreciate your time today. And again, to Chris and Alpine Brokerage for inviting me to have this call. We are at your disposal. We appreciate your business and everything that you do. And we certainly hope that you have a great day, a great weekend, a great holiday season. So thanks again.
Thank you, Kara. That was a lot of great information on an extremely complicated topic, which I think everybody got from that. So, a couple questions I think that are going through some people's minds are, one, why do I want to get involved in this? And I can tell you from working in this side of the business now for about 20 years, having done a lot of foreign national business, the reason you want to is the cases are large. The people who are buying these cases are not normally your mom and pop. You get a lot of wealthy people looking at these, and I'd say typically the premiums I see range between $10,000 and $100,000. So, it's definitely worth your while to do it. So the second question I think a lot of people is, okay, how do I digest some of this? Because there's a lot that you just heard. And there's two ways. One, this recording will be up on the website either today or tomorrow. Please feel free to go back and listen to it again. I've heard this now from her probably 3 times, as well as getting to look through it. I've been doing it, as I said, for 20 years, and there's still some additional information that I catch every time I watch it. So it's well worth going to see it again. The other thing that we can offer to help you here is pick up the phone and call your account executive here. We're happy to walk through the cases with you, talk about your prospects, talk about the center of influence. How do I talk to them? How do I approach them? What's the process? We'll work with you on all of that. So again, just pick up the phone and feel free to give us a call. I'd like to thank all of you very much for your time today. As I said, this will be up on the website in the next couple of days, but any questions, feel free to give us a call. Thank you very much.